All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Last time we covered 4 boxes of in the packet, and we completed all the prophets and Allah's signs last day. So we're looking at box 9, box 10, 7, and 8. Those are the boxes that we had completed, and congratulations, Sister Zahra, for taking the test and actually getting the highest score. So let's continue for now, and we're going to do box 11 and box 12. It's really easy because those until now are pretty straightforward. So we'll get to the deconstructing part I believe in boxes 15 and 16. That's when things require more attention. These are pretty straightforward. So let's go for 10 or box 11, and let's start with Amr, with the issues that relate to Deen, and what it meant that relate to Deen, meaning ritual and spirituality. So Amr, matter or affair, and umur would be plural, but you could see that many times in the Quran, and it appeared 13 times, many times in the Quran, it would be speaking about a great matter. So when we say amr here, although the word amr can also mean an order, but here many times it will appear as a matter, just speaking about such matter, such issue. Taqwa, right, appeared 17 times. Taqwa, piety, fear, or protection. But one thing is, when we say taqwa, it's usually when you are very cautious about something. So taqwa would mean extremely cautious and having the fear to transgress. So you are so considerate that you don't want to transgress the limit because you are so cautious. That's why, or actually, you are so cautious because you fear that you might transgress. So you would be having that taqwa, cautious. And at many times, taqwa would mean like a barrier between you and something. So this is taqwa. And here, they made it for you, the protection, which is what I was talking about, the barrier. And taqwa would mean that you are so cautious that you have the religious awakening and awareness that you fear to transgress. So it's a whole sentence. Let's move on. Haqq means truth and right. So when we say truth and right, and notice that it appeared 247 times, which can tell you that in Islam or in the Quran, it does not consider truth as relative, but in fact an absolute issue. So haqq, truth, and true or right. Okay, now what is the difference between truth and right? Right, that relates to when we're speaking about people's rights. All right, people's rights. You don't have that right to do such and such, meaning you don't have the haqq to do such and such. But when we speak about truth on its own, truth per se, then we're actually speaking about the actual truth. We're talking about the actual truth and what we mean by truth, which is the opposite of falsehood. And here's batil. Batil is the opposite of falsehood. Now, it's really important to mention that the word batil would simply mean that you're voiding something and you're considering it as totally void, meaning totally false. Hikmah would be wisdom. So hikmah would be wisdom, and wisdom is simply to do the right thing for the good consequence. So that would be hikmah. And that's why even when we speak to youth, we always say your parents would have more hikmah. Why? Because their experience enabled them to see and match and look at the consequences before we go into a certain behavior. So the hikmah would more be relating having the experience or the knowledge to know the consequence of something. And that would make up wisdom. So when you have wisdom, it usually comes with time. Usually comes with time, because that's the only way that that you were enabled to see the pattern of our actions and the different behaviors and the consequence, and to avoid the evil consequence by doing the right thing. So you avoid an evil consequence by doing the right thing before time, before it even happens. So that would be hikmah. Hikmah, wisdom. Hamd is praise. Hamd generally, and that's why the word Muhammad means the praised one. But hamd in itself means praise. Hamd, a person deserving hamd, or Allah deserving hamd, would mean that he deserves praise. Praise. Deen, there's actually a lot to say about the word deen, and notice that it appeared 92 times. The word deen, there are two things to it. Yes, it does mean religion in general. Religion in general, it can be a false religion or a true religion. And what we mean by religion is any ideology or any idea that you carry or that you embrace, which involves that you consider such a philosophy or such an idea, regardless if it's true or not, that interprets life, the purpose of life, what is behind life. And based on that idea, you start, let's say, putting your behavior into a certain practice. So let's, really, really quick here. So when we look at religion, well, religion doesn't come on its own, but religion in itself would develop into a law and understanding of how you should behave relating to the world around you. So the word deen can mean religion, law, or judgment, So all those would be included. And that's why in Islam, even atheism is a religion. Although they would consider that they stay away from religion or don't want to be associated to a particular religion. But just because you had an idea about life and existence and aftermath of this life, etc., that would mean that you have a particular religion. And because they would believe that there's no life, etc., then they would say life is matter in motion. And then they would say, well, let's invent or create our own purpose for our existence, which later becomes the existentialism. All right, so we're not going to go into a harder category, but here, just to understand that deen, it starts out with the philosophy of your understanding, and then it becomes the action that you carry. So when we say ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك, that appeared in Surah Yusuf, ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك, here is telling you that deen would mean the law, the constitution that the king had. So he wasn't going to transgress the law that the king had already appointed or had already assigned. So he wasn't going to transgress the laws. All right, Deen al-Malik, which tells you that you cannot in Islam separate between your behavior, the laws, then the principles that you do within your behavior, and also the idea that you carry about principle and what defines truth, what defines right and wrong, etc. All right, so this is just an idea about Deen. Zakah. Okay, the word zakah. Zakah is charity. But here's one thing. Zakah actually comes from the root zakah, which would mean to purify. So zakah would give an impression that yes, you got this money, but there is a small amount within your money that may actually not be lawful for you to take. So you purify yourself through zakah by giving 2.5% of your income that is past $3,913, at least for the year 2020. And you would do that purification that your money or your income or your property might be involved in. So you purify that amount by giving it away, just to make sure that you are free of any transgression within your money. So the word zakah would actually mean charity, but it would also mean purification. Shaheed or shuhada is a martyr or a witness. Okay, so a martyr or a witness, and what it means to be a martyr is to die for a certain noble cause. That would be the first type of shaheed. That shuhada would mean those nobles, those that a shaheed is one, and shuhada is plural. Those that had died for a noble and honorable cause would be the shaheed. They didn't just die, but they died for a certain noble cause, and that is the shaheed. And here, the shaheed in Islam would actually be the mujahid only. It wouldn't be the rest of the people that were mentioned in the hadith. Shaheed can also mean witness. All right? So the person that is witnessing on a contract, a person that is witnessing a crime. So that would mean that witnessing a situation in order to be that evidence to prove either the transgression over somebody's rights or the affirmation of somebody's rights. That I would have witnesses witness that I had bought that piece of land from X or Y, and therefore in the future those people would be my witnesses, my evidence, my support that indeed I did buy this land. All right, so that would be the witness. And it can also be here, shuhada can also mean the same thing, where witnesses, it's plural. You got a plural and you have a singular. And notice that it was actually mentioned 56 times, so you definitely have to memorize that one. Salah is prayer. That's an easy one. Salah is prayer. But one thing is that when we say salah, the word salah initially actually meant a prayer, meaning an invocation, meaning that you make the dua, okay, the invocation to invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But later it became specified only to mean the ritual, the five daily prayers. That later became salah. And in the Quran, when it's referring to salah, it is actually referring to the 5 daily prayers that we're speaking of. And when we speak about salah in general, it generally means just an invocation. Mubin meaning clear or self-expressive. It's obvious. So mubin is another word for it, is obvious or clear, a very obvious, clear matter that it doesn't require more evidences because it is so obvious. Nur means light. But here's one thing. The word nur is different than the word light is different than the other word, where not all nur is the same, because nur would mean that it doesn't actually light on itself. All right? But it is actually reflecting another light. And that's why when you look at the sun, the Quran was talking about it, was speaking about it as the siraj that makes the light. But when it spoke about the moon, it talked about it as nur, that it was reflecting light. So even in the Quran, when it was talking about the mu'mineen in Surah Al-Hadid, and it was talking about unzuruna naqtabis min nurikum, look at us, we are we are naqtabis, where the light that is coming out of you is reflecting on us. And then the ayah said, وَقِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ, go back. You can't be here. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a door between them. So the word nur, it is more that it was a light that was reflecting from another light, from another source of light. Let's say it that way. So that would be the nur. So when we speak about nur in general, think of it as reflecting light. Ahad and ihda. Ahad. So this is regarding ahad. Ahad would mean one, and ihda would mean one, but a female gender, and it would usually be relating to the numbers. So number one. All right, ilah and aliha. Ilah, whether it's a false deity or a true deity, in the end is that they have aliha. They're deities that they worship. They're deities that they think are God. They think are supposed to be holy in where they worship. But here's one thing, is that it's really important to mention that when we speak about aliha, it could be the deity that one might worship. So it could be what one might worship, and it could be what they believe is the creator or what is behind this world. So ilah and aliha would be generally what one might worship, and also what they believe is a creator. Now that's why in Islam there is no difference between believing in Allah, the one worthy of worship, and between the creator. But for the polytheists, they did differentiate. So they would believe the creator is one, but then they would go and worship something else. All right, but it would still be considered an ilah. It would still be considered a god or a deity, regardless of whether you thought that it was a creator or whether you actually considered it deserving worship. Sharik and shuraka. Sharik and shuraka. Sharik would mean associate or partner. Right, so an associate or partner. And when we speak about sharik, so when we say la sharika lah, that there's no one, and in the Quran it appears many times when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He does not have any partners, which is to indicate that no one shares any of the powers in the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you regarded that somebody is Allamul Ghuyub, that somebody knows the future, well, that's when you had considered that somebody else shares that description. So when we say sharik, that would mean that they are believing that somebody shares that idea, that description, and somebody is a partner to the Lord Almighty. All right? And shahada, notice here we did shaheed and shahada. They actually come from the same root, but we'll explain root later on, inshallah, tomorrow. No, Saturday. No, today is Saturday. No, today is Monday. Shahada. All right. Shahada is witness. Arsh. Shahada is witness. So this is the actual adjective. Arsh is throne. Arsh is throne. So the throne itself, meaning slash, can also be the chair. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we say Arsh ar-Rahman, we definitely do not think of an actual chair or a king chair, because this is part of al-ghaib. This is part of al-ghaib. Oh, here's the word. Al-ghaib, part of the unseen. All right? Ahd, unseen or hidden. Well, ahd can also mean a number of things, actually. Ahd can mean the promise that you had made with someone, and can also mean what I know about you. So what we already know about something. So the ahd, or what I would know, in other words, the integrity let's say it that way. Integrity, meaning that they had fulfilled the promise, and I know that a person's past was always such and such, meaning that type of integrity. And what I remember about them is such a habit. So that would be the ahd. So just to tell you, it would have a number of meanings, and the way we would know the meaning is looking at the context. The context is going to give me an idea. So let me summarize the meanings for ahd. So ahd would mean the promise, and ahd would mean what you know about somebody, the information that you know about somebody, and would also mean integrity. Okay, integrity. I know I have sloppy handwriting. All right, now ghaib, unseen. Ghaib, unseen. And when we say ghaib, although here unseen, but then we look at the context. Notice that it appeared 49 times. And ghaib, that it's always ghaib samawati wal ard, but there are instances where, for example, hafizatul lil ghaibi bima hafidallah. Well, definitely it's not talking about hafizatul lil ghaib, that she memorized that there are malaika, that there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are prophets. That's not, hafizatul ghaib is not referring to that, but then it's referring to what others are not aware of or observant to. So here it's talking about the home. Of course, at least in the ayah. But ghaib in general, anything that is unseen. And what we mean by unseen could be the malaika, could be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could be something in the past as well. So not always is it referring to what we can never see, with our naked eye, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, malaika, etc. But it could also be something that happened in the past, or something happened now, but you were not present. All right? So you were not present, and it happened. It could be right now. So right now I'm sitting here, but I don't really know what Salwa is doing in her home. That's part of ghaib. I'm not present. I'm not able to observe it. I'm not able to know what is happening. That becomes ghaib. So unseen, meaning you cannot see it, whether because you are not observing it, or whether because it is something that your own body is not going to be able to see it as Allah and the Malaika. Kitab and kutub. So kitab and kutub. This would be the singular and this would be the plural. So kitab would mean book. Kutub would mean books. So there's one book and books. But when we look at the book with the word kitab and kutub, books, in the Quran, notice that it appeared 261 times. All right, and therefore it's really important to say that not always is it referring to, for example, Quran or etc. It can also refer to scripture. So kitab or kutub can refer to scripture. So when it talks about Ahlul Kitab, it's referring to the people of the scripture, the people that had a scripture, regardless of it being edited, modified, reinterpreted, etc. In the end is that they have a scripture that they go back to. All right, so book or slash scripture. All right, or slash scripture. And kalima would mean word. In the Indo-Pakistani, they call kalima for la ilaha illallah. And kalima, 42 times, it would mean word. Kalima can also mean, it doesn't necessarily mean a word per se, it can also mean a sentence. A sentence or a phrase or a clause. So can mean word, phrase, clause, sentence, all that can mean kalima. All right, kalima, and appeared 42 times, kalima. And malak or malaika. The word malak is singular, and malaika are angels. Angels, or angels is malaika, and malak is an angel. And we know that for malak and malaika, there are definitely different religions that do believe in angels and their existence and all that. And from even the pagan Arabs, they did also believe and angels, but they believed that angels were the girls of Allah. And that's why the ayah was actually saying, are you affirming or considering that boys go back to you, but girls go back to Allah? Mithaq is a covenant or treaty, and il-mithaq would in the Quran would actually usually appear as the covenant or the treaty or the promise between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that connection, that bond. Here's another word, the bond between Allah and the prophets and the messengers. Okay, so that is the bond between Allah and the prophets and the messengers. Only once, and in the Quran, it actually called the bond between a husband and a wife as a strong bond. All right, as the strong bond. So it kind of gave that impression that the strong bond between husband and wife is like the bond between Allah and the prophets and the messengers. All right, so one, wahid and wahida. And you might say, well, we've got ahad right here, so what is the difference? They actually go back to the same root, ahada, and wahid and wahida. Wahid would mean one. Straightforward, there's no complication. One, just one. All right, let's go ahead with column 12, in where it is discussing deeds, people's actions. And when we speak about people's actions, we're going to talk about a'mal, actions, deeds, behaviors, a'mal, and the singular of it is actually amal. Amal is the singular for it. Hasana or hasanat. Hasana would mean good deed. In specific, it's more of a deed. But hasan or something hasan is actually something that is good. Ali ibn Abi Talib actually named Hasan, he named him Harb in the beginning, but then the Prophet ﷺ changed Hasan's name from Harb, which means war or battle, to Hasan, to mean good. All right, Hasan or Hasana and Hasanat. Hasana is the singular one, and Hasanat would mean the plural. And it's here referring to just good deeds in general. Good deeds in general, whatever good deed that you do, it's Hasana. And it is here important to mention that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it as Hasana, would mean that it is good, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is affirming that action is actually a good behavior. And the opposite of Hasana is Sayyi'ah. And that appeared 68 times. So when we say that the Quran referred to it as Sayyi'ah, that it is evil, or plural Sayyi'at, that they are Sayyi'at, that they are evil, would actually tell us that this is the ruling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had referred it to. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Qawm Lut, for example, calls it fahisha or sayyi'ah, or even calls the action in terms that refers to that behavior as being evil or not good, then that would actually tell us that this is one way where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is determining that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is determining that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is regarding it as. It would be regarded as evil, as wrongdoing. So sayyi'ah would be the singular and sayyi'at would be the plural. Khair is better or good. So khair, how do I know if it's good or better? You'd look at the context. If the context is telling you that is khair, then that would mean that that's good. But if it is comparing or giving you some superiority, then that would actually mean that is better. Shar would mean evil. And you can see here in the Quran that there's khair and shar, and it more talked about good than talked about evil. Something to consider. Quran more talked about good than actually talked about evil. But here's one thing. is that what do we get out of the word khair and shar? That relativity in Islam does not exist, at least in when we're talking about behavior and if something is good or bad. Ithm and dhanb and junah. You could see right here, ithm, dhanb, and junah. All right, the difference between these. They all mean sin, but they actually have slight differences in the meaning. Let's start with junah. We're going to start with that one. Junah. Junah would more, yes, it means sin, but it also means to transgress the limit. So junah would mean a transgression, and ithm would mean more as a sin. So ithm would mean sin, and junah would mean more into sin/transgression. And the difference between that is that there is a borderline, and you had crossed that borderline. That's when you had committed a transgression. Ithm would be a sin. The difference between transgression and sin. So this is talking about that there was a limit to it. Dhanb and dhunub. Dhanb is like having that there's a trace to it, so that there's a sin that traces back and it's still following you. All right, and that's why there's the dhanab. Dhanab would mean tail, and dhanb, it comes from that idea in where it is still tracing, it is still accompanying you. The effect of that particular sin is still present, and it is a sin, but it is accompanying you. The influences, the impact are still there. So you look at those terms to go deep. Where do I see it in? Ithm and dhanb and junah. Although, like I said, they all mean sin, but each one actually carries a different connotation. Haram would mean unlawful, and haram would mean very similar to junah, because it is more of a transgression. But haram would mean that the person had not only committed a transgression, but they went into the zone of the zone that is a noble zone, or a zone that is a dangerous zone. So it could be two sides to it. It could be a noble zone, or it could be a dangerous zone. So that would mean haram, and that's where unlawful. When you look at haram, think of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually says, al-halalu bayyin wal-haramu bayyin. Halal is clear and haram is clear, and between them there's that red line, that وَبَيْنَهُمْ أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَةٌ. There are certain areas that are gray. That's where, and then the hadith continues and says that أَلَا وَإِنَّ لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ حِمَى. Every single king has this area of what is the security area to watch out, to make sure that no one is harming or is transgressing the security or the guard that he had considered as his own property, or his own, what is the word, but the area that he owns, or the area that he rules over. So that considers haram. It's basically that area where you transgress, you go out. There's a certain zoning, right? That would be haram, that you have transgressed the limit. Ism and asma. Ism and asma. So ism would be the singular, and asma would be the plural. Ism and asma. Now, one thing is that when we say ism, it would really be the particular word that we use to identify different matters, or different people, or different things from others. So that would be that defining article for the ism. The name, what you use in order to call or identify a specific item. Asma would be plural. It's mentioned 27 times. Well, we would actually for sure we would say it's definitely more than that, because we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and that's 114 times mentioned in the Quran. So the word ism definitely appears more than 27 times. Alright, so ism and asma, just by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim would tell you in the name of Allah, tells you more than that. Hadith and ahadith. Hadith and ahadith. This would be the singular and this would be the plural. Singular and plural. And when you see the word hadith, it's speaking about a speech. It's talking about somebody said something. There was a certain matter that was said. And ahadith would be the plural of it. And this is singular and this is plural. Okay? Now, it's really important to mention that when it talks about a certain specific speech, many times when we speak about hadith and ahadith, it's basically what was said. Just what was said. It doesn't necessarily it doesn't always refer to as a discourse. You know, the discourse, the rhetoric. Sometimes it can refer to rhetoric that the rhetoric would more be associated with the word mala. Mala, when it's a rhetoric. So al-mala, we're going to get to that word. We're going to get to that word later on. I know it's in the other box. But generally speaking, al-mala would be the kind of like the media today, where it's, you know, the heads of the people are the chieftains. The chieftains have decided, and then it becomes the common saying. Everybody else is using that same idea. So one person spreads a rumor, spreads an idea, and that idea becomes the idea that everybody else embraces, and it becomes the rhetoric that everybody else is repeating. All right? And that would be the hadith. That would be the speech, the discourse, the talk that is there. All right? طيبة and طيبات. Good. But طيبة would more be, when we say طيب, would mean pure. And this is so beautiful to say. I mean, when you look at the word الطيبون للطيبات, there's a certain purity. The pure men are for pure women. And this is referring to marriage. The opposite of طيب is actually khabith. Khabith. All right? So the طيب, the opposite of it is khabith. But with the word طيب, like I said, would mean pure or good, meaning that it didn't get contaminated. And that's why when we look at الطيبون للطيبات, that they didn't get contaminated. They didn't get contaminated with the other ill behaviors, illicit behaviors that others are embracing. And that's why they're tayyib. They're tayyib, meaning they're pure. They are still on the beautiful instinct that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created them in. So tayyib would generally mean pure. Halal, or it can also mean, tayyib would mean pure when we're talking about food. That akl tayyibat, for example, eating tayyib, pure, things that are not contaminated, they're not contaminated, or things that are not contaminators, if that is even a word. So they don't contaminate you. If we're talking about akl tayyib, you're eating pure things that are not contaminating you, because those contaminators can affect you. And here's a question. Are those numbers on the side how many times the word appears in the Quran? Right, that's supposed to be how many words, but don't trust it fully, because I did see that some of those numbers are not accurate, just like this. You can't, I mean, there's no way that the word ism appeared 27 times when we already know that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim appeared 114 times. Even though Surah At-Tawbah doesn't have one, but you will have in وَأَنَّهُ مِن سُلَيْمَانَ وَأَنَّهُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. But still, we would know that the word ism appeared more than that. But just an idea with the numbers of how many times it appeared. So طيب would mean pure, and طيبات is the plural of that pure, when you're staying away from that contamination. آلاء are favors, and فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان, and that appeared in Surah Ar-Rahman 34 times, or 31 or 34. Can't remember exactly. Ala, favors. But when we look at ala, not always is it favors, because it would also mean blessings. Blessings there. Well, favors and blessings, somehow they are very similar in many ways. But ala. Sultan. Sultan would mean not the sultan, that we have in our minds, where it's got a turban and a little gem over his turban. No, that's not what this is referring to. Sultan would mean any authority or any warrant or any power. All right, so or even sultan can also mean evidence. So when sultan, what epistemology, actually, here's the word. So authority, evidence, warrant, authority, and that would be the sultan. Okay, don't think of sultan the kind that we have in our mind about, wearing a turban, sitting on a throne, and with a big huge ring on his finger. Fadl, grace. But here's one thing, by the way, it says grace, but fadl actually can also mean remainder. So what does that mean? Think of this. Think of that you have an abundant amount, even more than what you need. All right? That would be fadl. That remainder part, that is, because it's so abundant, that you've got extra and more than what you need, that's the grace, or that's the blessing, or that's the fadl. You've got an abundant amount, even more than what you need, and that would be il-fadl. So the remaining part, the remainder of a blessing. Ma, water. All right. It could also mean / liquid. So water or liquid. All right. Any liquid would be ma. All right. And mulk would mean the Ryan. So dominion, ownership, property. Could also all of it be mulk. When you own something, the ownership. Could also, ownership. Ni'ma would be very similar to ala, by the way. So ni'ma would be that it's a blessing and a favor. So you could see that here. It said ala, and that's plural. And ni'ma would mean favor. Ajma'un and ajma'in. And the reason why they would be different is because of the different part of speech. So that would be, it's a grammatical difference that's a little more advanced than this. Ajma'un and ajma'in would mean all. But usually ajma'un would mean combined. So they are combined together, and that's why they're ajma. They're combined together, so they became all of them. But they are combined. They are somehow united together, relating this matter, whether it's good or evil. Idhn is permission. Idhn is permission. Idhn. And that's why when we talk about udhun, which would mean ear, meaning that it was heard, it was considered. And so it is actually the same timing. Idhn is permission. Idhn is permission. So there's a permission to do something, meaning that the person is allowed to do it. Ba's is punishment. Oh, sorry, my bad. Not punishment. Ba's is power and adversity. But here's one thing. Ba's can also mean that there's something not acceptable in it. So we could say it can also mean power, that the one has ba's, meaning that they have power, and it could also mean that there is ba's in that matter, the meaning that there's going to be a punishment, meaning that it's a transgression. All right. So when we look at it, the way we would know whether it's talking about power or whether it's talking about punishment is really the context. The context is going to tell us how to differentiate between these matters. And there are different ways to other than the context, but that's a totally different route to go to. But just in general, just remember that bets can refer to power, some kind of authority that one has. All right. And when we say la ba'sa alayk, would mean that it's okay. There, although there may be some transgression, but we're gonna let go. So this is la ba'sa alayk. It's not saying I'm just hoping that you would have no power. But here, no, la ba'sa alayk would mean that there is la ba'sa alayk, meaning there is no harm. There's no harm happening to you. So you could see that ba's can mean power and can mean harm. And because harm itself can actually have power over you in the end, can overcome different things. Jami'a, similar to ajma'un, and it would mean that also united. They're groups that are united, and they are these groups as united groups. Now they had become all of them. Sawa would mean same, equal, and level. So what that would mean when we're talking about sawa, we're talking about a patterning. All right. In the Quran, patterning is very common in the Quran, where it's telling you about the commonality between the past and the future, the commonality between different items that are created around us in the world, and would also mean sawa in where it's comparing even people. It's comparing actions. It's comparing different understandings. So there's always that comparison, all right? Because it doesn't consider everything to be equal, because not everything is equal. So then it would give you that comparison. So most of the times when it's talking about sawa in the Quran, it will tell you to use that comparison tool and to compare, are these two equal? Are these two the same? So قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. It's talking about يَسْتَوِي. Are they comparable? Are they on the same level? Do you even consider them to be the equal? It can't be the same. So here sawa in itself, just the word itself, would actually mean equal or on the same level. All right, sawa, and can also mean sawa. So when we're talking about sawa is-sabil, we're talking about a balanced route. And this is really important because in the Quran it talks about sawa is-sabil, a route that is balanced. So when we live our life with balanced behaviors, with balanced choices, in where we don't let our own transgressions, our own inclinations rule and in mentor our behavior, but we decide based on balanced understanding of what is good for me and what is wrong, etc. And then I would also consider making the balance between the decision that I make, my inclinations, what I would like to do, and the influences or even the consequences, let's say it that way, and how it will impact me. Fariq, so this is fariq. Fariq would mean party or group, and team. What we say team, so talks about a lot of teams, that there are people that join together on a shared for a shared purpose, for a common purpose, or for a common action, and do the same thing, and those would be fariq. And this is really important to think about, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell you, think of and ask yourself, whose fariq are you on? Who are you part of? Are you fariqun fil jannati wa fariqun fis sa'ir? There's a group, there's a party, there's a team that they were united on a particular matter, particular purpose. They shared a common culture, and therefore they would be in Jannah or in hellfire. And that's something for everyone to think of. do I share more of the culture of maybe the deviant groups, or do I more share culture, practice, wishes, aims, goals, disciplines, etc. with the Salihin or with the other people? Who do I share with? And that's why, it is amazing how the Prophet ﷺ was always talking about the different things in our life, even if it involved the way you dress, the way you talk, the way many times people would ask me, is piercing halal or haram? And it's like, well, let me ask you this. Do you feel that this makes you fit in, part of the salihin or part of the fasidin? It's, we can't separate the action from the effect and the influences that it has on your heart. I know you're like, okay, here we're going into a maw'idha in the meaning class or the vocabulary class. Let's talk about the relatives. All right, relatives, and here we go. We got mother. This is singular and this would be plural. So mother. But one thing is that mother in the Arabic, in the Arabic culture, doesn't necessarily mean mother per se, meaning the woman that is the biological mother who bore that child, but can also mean the base of something, the foundation of something. So when we talk about ummahat and it most of the times it will talk about the bearer, meaning the person that bared that child or bore that child, to be more accurate, but it can also mean like Kitab, for example. Kitab, it doesn't mean that there was a mother that had the baby child called Kitab, or that is book, but no, it's talking about meaning the foundation, right? So mother or / foundation of something. And let's go for ab and abati. All right, and ab and abati. Abati would more be relating to, and it would only appear 2 times really. Abati, 2 times or once. And ab would be the father. So just as this would mean foundation, same thing with ab, it would mean also the foundation. So both and ab would mean the foundation and can also mean the actual father who bore that child. Zawj and azwaj. Zawj and azwaj. Zawj would be the plural, the singular, and azwaj would be the plural. So zawj and azwaj. And you could see zawj would mean pair as well. Sometimes it can mean the wife and the husband, but it can also mean pair, meaning male and female. And pair, when we talk about pairs as male, female, we could see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in a certain pattern of male and female as a pattern. Rajul would be the singular, and rijal would be the plural of men. So rajul would mean one man, and rijal, men. All right, imra'a would mean woman. There's no other way to interpret it. It's just woman. And the plural of one woman is nisa. Okay, imra'a and nisa. I know it's has nothing to do with the same root, but imra'a is one woman and nisa is a group of women. Walad and awlad. Walad would mean one boy or one, and every kullu mawludan walad, so every whatever that father, mother, whatever they have begotten would be considered walad. And awlad would be the plural. Walad is one, awlad is more than one. Walid would be the parents. Okay, walid would be walidain, sorry. Walidain would be the parents, and walid would be the father, meaning the one that begot. All right, dhurriya, this is all relatives, by the way. Dhurriya, the descendants, those that go back to a particular biological parent or 2 parents would be dhurriya. Ibn is son. Ibn is son. Banun, banin, abna, they all mean the same thing, and the reason why they are different is depending on the part of speech. So banoon, banin, and abna would mean the plural, and they are generally sons. Akh and akhu and akha and akhi are all meaning brother, but it depends on the part of speech. And ikhwan would mean the same thing. So you've got akh and ikhwan, it would mean brothers. We're gonna end right here, or should we do wajh and body parts really quick? So the body parts that appear, wajh or wujuh would mean face, ayn or ayun would mean an eye or a spring. Look at that. By the way, the word ayn actually has more meanings than that, just to tell you. It can also mean spy, it can mean so many different things. But in the Quran, it only, as to what I remember, it only comes as to mean an eye or a spring. A spring to mean spring of water. Not spring meaning the season, but spring of water. Absar, sights. And absar, when we speak about sight, it can mean the actual eye that sees it. It can also mean the insight. So to see beyond the surface, that would be an insight. Afwah, mouths. I know it's so hard in English to say mouths. Mouths meaning afwah, meaning more than one mouth. Because fam would mean one mouth. Afwah would mean many mouths. Lisan and alsina. Lisan would mean one tongue, and alsina would mean tongues. And one thing is that, for example, اختلاف ألسنتكم. It's not that people have different tongues, but here it's referring, it's more of a metaphor and to mean different languages. Okay, so it can mean tongue and it can also mean language. So more of a metaphor, but it can also be to mean different languages. Qalb, singular, and qulub is plural. And you could see it's amazing how it, 132 times for the word qalb in the Quran. And you got yad, which would mean hand. It's really amazing to look at these numbers and actually see, how many times it referred to it in its importance. So qalb and qulub. So qalb would be the singular and qulub would be the plural and would mean heart. By the way, it can mean heart and it can mean it can mean the core of something too. The core of something. So qalb shay, when we speak about the core of an apple, we're not necessarily talking about the qalb, that a piece of or heart, kind of like what we know that pumps blood. Okay, but no, it can mean the core of something too. So the core of something as well. And qulub, same thing. So in the Quran, when it talks about heart or al-qalb, it is not necessarily like the ayah was saying that they have qulubun la yafqahun biha. So wait a minute. Does the heart actually do the thinking, or is it the brain? So anything that is a core can be referring to the brain core as the core. That would mean that this is the core. It's not necessarily talking about that actual gland that pumps blood and those sides to it, but it's actually talking about a core of something. The core, that they're deep on the inside, the core of it is what it's referring to. Sadr, and it's talking about the breast, but breast or / chest. In the Quran, when it talks about sadr, it's a different thing than qalb. And same thing, it's a different than ruh. I do have a lecture in where I explain the difference between qalb, sadr, and ruh. To make the story short, ruh is the soul or the spirit way inside. The sadr and qalb, the sadr is relating to one's Islam, but the qalb would more be relating to one's iman. So it's a different level. And the ruh would be relating to one's fu'ad. One's fu'ad meaning the deeper core. All right. This is, just a rough thing. Qalb and qulub. So qalb would mean the core of something and or cores of something, which is the plural. Sadr and sudur, breast or / chest. All right, but it's not referring to the chest per se, meaning it doesn't necessarily speak about it in terms of sadr meaning talking about a body part, it many times can be a metaphor to mean the middle of something. All right, the middle of something. So sadr can also mean the middle of something, the main space of something. Yad and aidi can mean hand and can sometimes be that yad can, so here's the singular and here's the plural, can also mean that metaphor to it, which would speak about power or the authority or the ability to give orders. Okay, so that would be the yad as well. So just keep that in mind in where it's talking about yad and aidi. Yad would be singular and aidi would be plural. Rijl and arjul. Rijl would mean one leg and arjul would mean foot. So here it said, arjul would mean legs. Rijl does not actually mean foot, but the rijl would actually mean leg in general, and it can, and أرجل. So فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. أرجلكم in this ayah would mean foot. All right, but you're going to look at it in the context. رجل and nafs and anfus. And here it's talking about soul, but nafs would have many meanings, really. But the nafs itself, like the soul itself, has all those powers to mentor or determine a lot of your actions. So anfus would be the plural, nafs would be one. Ruh. And scholars, look at the word nafs 293 times. Ruh would be the soul and the spirit. Ruh would more be relating to that peace within our bodies that can bring us to life or death. All right, and the nafs would have more implications than just that piece of it. It can be used as to mean the ruh as well. It depends on the context. Quwwa, power or strength. Quwwa, power or strength. All right, that's it for today. Be happy to answer any questions. And next week, inshallah, it's going to be box 14. And of course, we're going to go for the more complex side of it. And there's that deconstruction that we'll be doing. So that's the fun part and that patterning. And we are close to finishing, inshallah. So we've got 14 boxes and 38 boxes. So we're almost halfway. And jazakumullah khairan, everybody. If there's any question, be happy to answer any questions. So if there are any questions. All right, so looks like there aren't any questions. And Zahra S, you were the highest. You were the one to get the highest grade, and mashallah, you did great, outstanding. And that was a good job, mashallah. I was so happy to hear that. And I guess we should, congratulate you for getting the highest grade. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody.